The bell above the shop door chimed with a sound like cracking bone. Marge Simpson stepped into the cramped antique store on Shelbyville Avenue, her blue hair catching dust motes that danced in the amber light filtering through grimy windows. The shop smelled of decay and forgotten memories. "Looking for anything particular, ma'am?" The shopkeeper's voice emerged from the shadows, a thin man with eyes like black holes. "Just browsing," Marge replied, her voice echoing strangely in the narrow aisles, packed with relics of lives long extinguished. That's when she saw it. The mirror stood propped against a wall of dusty furniture, its ornate bronze frame writhing, with carved serpents whose eyes seemed to follow her movement. The glass itself was peculiar, not quite silver, not quite black, but something in between that made her stomach turn with inexplicable dread. Ah, that piece, the shopkeeper materialized beside her like smoke. Victorian, they say. Belonged to a woman who well, who looked too long. Marge's reflection wavered in the strange glass. For just a moment, she thought she saw something else herself, but with eyes full of a hunger she'd never acknowledged. The image smiled with too many teeth. "I'll take it," she heard herself say. Homer barely glanced up from his beer when Marge hung the mirror in their bedroom. "Looks expensive," he grunted, then returned to the television's blue glow. That night, as Marge prepared for bed, she caught her reflection and froze. The woman in the mirror was her, undoubtedly same blue hair, same pearl necklace, same green dress. But this other Marge's eyes held a darkness that made her throat constrict. This other Marge was smiling, and her smile was wrong. The reflection mouthed words that Marge's own lips hadn't spoken. "I know what you want." Marge stumbled backward, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. When she looked again, the mirror showed only her own pale, terrified face. She convinced herself it was exhaustion, stress, the daily grind of managing 3 children and a husband who treated her like invisible furniture. That's all. But deep in her chest, something stirred a recognition she refused to name. Days passed. The mirror called to her with the persistence of hunger. Each time Marge approached, the other version of herself appeared more clearly, more vividly. This shadow Marge spoke of desires buried beneath years of self-sacrifice and suffocating domesticity. "You could have been anything," the reflection whispered during a particularly difficult morning after Bart had been suspended again. "Remember when you painted? Remember when you dreamed?" Marge's hands trembled as she watched her reflections. Fingers traced patterns in the air spirals that seemed to hypnotize, to pull her consciousness deeper into the glass. "They take and take and take," Shadow Marge continued, her voice like silk wrapped around broken glass. "Your energy, your youth, your very self. When did you last feel alive?" The worst part wasn't the words themselves. It was how right they felt. 2 weeks after bringing the mirror home, Marge pressed her palm against the glass surface. A cold penetrated her skin like needles of ice, but instead of pulling away, she pressed harder. The other Marge pressed back from the opposite side, and their palms aligned perfectly. Through the glass, Marge could feel warmth her other self's pulse, her other self's desperate need for connection. "Let me through," Shadow Marge pleaded, her voice now clearly audible without the barrier of glass between them. "I can give you everything they've stolen. I can make you feel again." The glass began to ripple like water. Marge felt the surface give way beneath her palm, and Shadow Marge's fingers began to emerge, first the tips, then the knuckles, then the entire hand reaching into Marge's reality. Those fingers were wrong. They moved with too many joints, and where they touched Marge's wrist, her skin began to discolor, turning the mottled gray of old bruises. Marge yanked her hand back with a scream that brought Homer running. But when he arrived, the mirror showed only normal glass, and Marge's wrist bore only the faint outline of fingerprints that faded even as she stared. "Bad dream, honey?" Homer asked with the genuine concern of someone interrupted during a crucial moment of television watching. Marge nodded, unable to speak. In the mirror's reflection, she saw Homer leave. But Shadow Marge remained, shaking her head in disappointment. "Soon," the reflection mouthed. "Very soon." The mirror's influence spread through the house like a contagion. Marge found herself snapping at the children with increasing frequency, her patience worn to threads. When Lisa practiced saxophone, the music sounded like screaming. When Bart's pranks backfired, she felt a savage satisfaction watching him face consequences. Homer's presence became unbearable. His every grunt, every thoughtless comment, every expectation that she would clean up his messes filled her with a rage so pure was almost beautiful. But it was in the quiet moments, when the family slept and the house settled around her like a tomb, that Shadow Marge grew strongest. Their conversations became longer, more intimate. Shadow Marge understood her in ways no one else ever had. "They've made you into a ghost," Shadow Marge said one midnight. "A servile phantom haunting your own life. But I remember who you were. I remember what you wanted before they trained you to want nothing." Marge began to spend hours before the mirror, watching her reflection transform. Shadow Marge's clothes became more vibrant, her hair more lustrous, her eyes brighter with malevolent life. Meanwhile, Marge herself grew paler, more translucent, as if her reflection was somehow drawing substance from her. The children noticed. Lisa asked if she was feeling well. Bart, in a rare moment of genuine concern, offered to help with chores. Even Homer suggested she see a doctor, but doctors couldn't cure what was wrong with her. What was wrong with her was life itself, the slow suffocation of dreams. Beneath the weight of others' needs, it began with her fingertips. Marge woke one morning to find the skin around her nails loose and papery. When she touched it, entire strips peeled away like old wallpaper, revealing fresh pink skin beneath. The new skin was more sensitive, more alive to every sensation. "You're molting," Shadow Marge explained that evening, her face now pressed against the interior surface of the mirror, "shedding the dead layers they forced upon you. Soon you'll be reborn." Each day brought more peeling. The skin of her arms came away in long, translucent sheets that she found herself compulsively collecting in a shoebox beneath the bed. The new skin underneath was different, more vibrant, but also somehow wrong. It had a faint luminescence, and when she looked closely, she could see dark veins pulsing beneath the surface in patterns that hurt to follow. The family remained oblivious. They saw what they expected to see. Dutiful Marge, reliable Marge, invisible Marge. Even when she stood directly before them with raw, weeping patches where skin had sloughed away, they looked through her as if she were made of glass. Only Shadow Marge truly saw her. Only Shadow Marge appreciated the transformation. "Beautiful?" the reflection whispered as Marge peeled away the skin of her face, revealing the luminescent flesh beneath. "Soon there will be nothing left of their Marge, only us." The night it happened, Springfield was locked in the grip of a thunderstorm that made the house groan like a dying animal. Lightning illuminated the bedroom in stark, stuttering glimpses. And in those moments of brightness, the mirror seemed to dissolve entirely. Shadow Marge stood in the frame, not as a reflection, but as a presence occupying the same space, waiting to step through. Marge approached the mirror for the last time. Her body was now more raw flesh than skin, her nerves exposed and singing with hypersensitive awareness. Every breath was ecstasy and agony combined. "Are you ready?" Shadow Marge asked. Marge nodded. She was so tired of pretending, so exhausted by the performance of contentment. She pressed both palms against the glass and felt it yield like warm honey. Shadow Marge's hands emerged first, and this time Marge didn't pull away when those wrong fingers began to peel away the final layers of her old self. The pain was indescribable, like being born in reverse, like being turned inside out while remaining conscious of every nerve ending. But beneath the agony was relief. With each strip of skin that Shadow Marge peeled away, Marge felt lighter, freer. Her old self-patient, self-sacrificing, perpetually accommodating, was being discarded like a costume that no longer fit. The mirror cracked with a sound like breaking bones, and Shadow Marge stepped through into the bedroom. For a moment, two versions of Marge stood facing each other, one raw and new and pulsing with dark life, the other a hollow shell of social expectations and suppressed desires. Then they began to merge. Homer found her the next morning, sitting before the broken mirror and humming a tune he'd never heard. She looked normal, more than normal. She looked radiant, vibrant in a way that made his eyes water to look directly at her. "Morning, honey," he said, kissing the top of her head. "Sleep well?" "Wonderfully," Marge replied, and her voice had a musical quality that made his bones itch. "I feel like a completely new person." The children noticed the change too, though they couldn't articulate. What was different? Marge's smiles were brighter, her hugs lasted longer, her attention more focused. She asked questions about their dreams, their fears, their secret desires with an intensity that was both thrilling and unsettling. But it was in the quiet moments that the truth revealed itself. When she thought no one was watching, Marge's reflection. In windows, in puddles, in any reflective surface, showed something else entirely. Something with too many teeth and eyes that swirled with patterns that induced vertigo in anyone who looked too long. The broken mirror in the bedroom reflected. Nothing at all now, just empty. Black space that seemed to extend infinitely into dimensions the human mind couldn't process. At night, when the family slept, Marge stood before that empty frame and whispered to the darkness within. She told it about her day, about the delicious weight of her family's trust, about the exquisite pleasure of being truly seen and appreciated for the first time in her life. And sometimes, if you listened carefully during those Springfield nights, when the wind carried strange sounds and the shadows moved independently of their sources, you could hear her laughter, beautiful and terrible and utterly, completely satisfied. The mirror had given her exactly what she'd wanted, a life where she was finally, truly alive. The fact that everyone else in that life was now living with something that only resembled Marge Simpson seemed, to her, a perfectly acceptable trade. After all, they'd never really seen her anyway. The broken mirror remains in the Simpson house. To this day, though the family has long since forgotten it was ever whole. Sometimes, visitors catch glimpses of movement in its fractured surface, shadows that shouldn't exist, reflections that don't match their source. But Springfield has always been a town comfortable with inexplicable phenomena, and no one asks. Too many questions about why Marge Simpson's smiles never quite reach her eyes, or why her laughter sounds like breaking glass, or why the temperature drops several degrees whenever she enters a room. Some transformations, after all, are simply too complete to undo.